The avenue des Champs-Élysées, NY.ZE, e.li.ze, is a boulevard in the 8th arrondissement of Paris, 1.9 kilometers long and 70 meters wide, running between the Place de la Concorde and the Place Charles de Gaulle, where the Arc de Triomphe is located. It is known for its theatres, cafés and luxury shops, for the annual Bastille Day military parade, and as the finish of the Tour de France cycle race. The name is French for the Elysian Fields, the paradise for dead heroes in Greek mythology. The French proudly call the world-famous boulevard la Place Belle Avenue du Monde. Description: the avenue runs for 1.91 kilometers through the 8th arrondissement in northwestern Paris, from the Place de la Concorde in the east, with the obelisk of Luxor, to the Place Charles de Gaulle in the west location of the Arc de Triomphe. The Champs-Élysées forms part of the axe historique. The lower part of the Champs-Élysées, for the Place de la Concorde to the Rond Point, runs through the Jardin des Champs-Élysées, a park which contains the Grand Palais, the Petit Palais, the Tete Marigny, and several restaurants, gardens and monuments. The Élysée Palace, the official residence of the Presidents of France, borders the park, but is not on the avenue itself. The Champs-Élysées ends at the Arc de Triomphe, built to honor the victories of Napoleon Bonaparte. History. Until the reign of Louis XIV, the land where the Champs-Élysées runs today was largely occupied by fields and kitchen gardens. The Champs-Élysées and its gardens were originally laid out in 1667 by André Le Notre as an extension of the Tuileries Garden. The gardens of the Tuileries Palace, which had been built in 1564, and which Le Notre had rebuilt in his own formal style for Louis XIV in 1664. Le Notre planned a wide promenade between the palace and the modern Rond Point, lined with 2 rows of elm trees on either side, and flower beds in the symmetrical style of the French formal garden. The new boulevard was called the Grand Cause, or Grand Promenade. It did not take the name of Champs-Élysées until 1709. In 1710 the avenue was extended beyond the Rond Point as far as the modern Place d'Étoile. In 1765 the garden was remade in the Le Notre style by Abel François Poisson, the Marquis de Marigny, brother of the Madame de Pompadour and Director General of the King's Buildings. Marigny extended the avenue again in 1774 as far as the modern Porte Maillot. By the late 18th century, the Champs-Élysées had become a fashionable avenue. The trees on either side had grown enough to form formal rectangular groves. The gardens of the town houses of the nobility built along the Faubourg Saint-Honoré backed onto the formal gardens. The grandest of the private mansions near the avenue was the Élysée Palace, a private residence of the nobility which during the Third French Republic became the official residence of the Presidents of France. Following the French Revolution, 2 equestrian statues, made in 1745 by Nicolas and Guillaume Cousteau, were transferred from the former royal palace at Marly and placed at the beginning of the boulevard and park. After the downfall of Napoleon and the restoration of the French monarchy, the trees had to be replanted, because the occupation armies of the Russians, British and Prussians during the 100 Days had camped in the park and used the trees for firewood. The avenue from the Rond Point to the Étoile was built up during the Empire. The Champs-Élysées itself became city property in 1828, and footpaths, fountains, and, later, gas lighting were added. In 1834, under King Louis Philippe, The architect Jacques-Ignace Hittorf was commissioned to redesign the Place de la Concorde and the gardens of the Champs-Élysées. He kept the formal gardens and flower beds essentially intact, but turned the garden into a sort of outdoor amusement park, with a summer garden café, the Alcazar-de-Té, 2 restaurants, the Le Doyen and the Restaurant de Horloge, a theatre, the located.The Panorama, built in 1839, where large historical paintings were displayed, and the Cirque d'Été, a large hall for popular theatre, musical and circus performances. He also placed several ornamental fountains around the park, of which 3 are still in place. The major monument of the boulevard, the Arc de Triomphe, had been commissioned by Napoleon after his victory at the Battle of Austerlitz, but it was not finished when he fell from power in 1815. The monument remained unfinished until 1833–36, when it was completed by King Louis Philippe. In 1855, Emperor Napoleon III selected the park at the beginning of the avenue as the site of the first great international exposition to be held in Paris, the Exposition Universelle. The park was the location of the Palace of Industry, a giant exhibit hall which covered 30,000 square meters, where the Grand Palais is today. In 1858, following the exposition, the Emperor's prefect of the Seine, Georges Eugene Haussmann, had the gardens transformed from a formal French garden into a picturesque English-style garden, with groves of trees, flower beds and winding paths. The rows of elm trees, which were in poor health, were replaced by rows of chestnut trees. The park served again as an exposition site during the Universal Exposition of 1900. It became the home of the Grand Palais and Petit Palais. It also became the home of a new panorama theatre, designed by Gabriel de Vieude, the chief architect of Napoleon III. In 1858, the modern Theatre Marigny was built by Charles Garnier, architect of the Paris Opera, in 1883. Throughout its history, the avenue has been the site of military parades. The most unhappy were the victory parades of German troops in 1871 and again in 1940, celebrating the fall of France on the 14th of July 1940, and the 3 most joyous were the parades celebrating the Allied victory in the First World War in 1919, and the parades of Free French and American forces after the liberation of the city, respectively. The French 2nd Armored Division on the 26th of August 1944, and the U.S. 28th Infantry Division on the 29th of August 1944. Champs-Élysées Association and retail stores on the avenue. In 1860, the merchants along the avenue joined together to form the syndicate d'Initiative et de Défense des Champs-Élysées, changed to an association in 1916 to promote commercially the avenue. In 1980, the group changed its name to the Comité des Champs-Élysées and to Comité Champs-Élysées in 2008. It is the oldest standing committee in Paris. The committee has always dedicated itself to seeking public projects to enhance the avenue's unique atmosphere, and to lobby the authorities for extended business hours and to organizing special events. Today, the committee, in coordination with other professional organizations, may review with the Parisian administration the addition to the avenue of new businesses whose floor area would exceed 1,000 square meters. Because of the high rents, few people live on the Champs-Élysées. The upper stories tend to be occupied by offices. Rents are particularly high on the north side of the avenue, because of better exposure to sunlight. The avenue is one of the most famous streets in the world for upscale shopping. Adidas, Benetton, the Disney Store, Nike, Zara, H&M, Cartier, Columbia, Bel Fashion, Toyota, Gap, and Sephora occupy major spaces, traditionally home to popular brands as well as luxury brands Louis Vuitton, Hugo Boss, Lancel, Guerlain, Lacoste, Hotel de la Piva, e.li.ze Palace and Fouquet's. The arrival of global chain stores in recent years has strikingly changed its character, and in a first effort to stem these changes, the city of Paris initially decided in 2007 to prohibit the Swedish clothing chain H&M from opening a store on the avenue. However, a large H&M store opened 2 years later at 88 Champs-Élysées. In 2008, American clothing chain Abercrombie & Fitch was given permission to open a store. Events. Every year on Bastille Day on the 14th of July, the largest military parade in Europe passes down the Champs-Élysées, reviewed by the President of the Republic. Every year during Advent, Christmastide, and Epiphany, the Champs-Élysées Committee contribute for the holidays season's lighting of the Champs-Élysées. This generally occurs from late November until early January. Since 1975, the last stage of the Tour de France cycling race has finished on the Champs-Élysées. The subsequent awards ceremony also takes place directly on the avenue. Huge gatherings occasionally take place on the Champs-Élysées in celebration of popular events, such as New Year's Eve, or when France won the 1998 FIFA World Cup. The Champs-Élysées has occasionally been the site of large political protest meetings. Public transport. Paris Metro Line 1 runs under the Champs-Élysées. Station Charles de Gaulle, Étoile, is at the street's west end, and there are 3 stations with entrances on the street itself from west to east. These are George V by the Hotel George V, Franklin D. Roosevelt at the Rond-Point des Champs-Élysées, Clemenceau Place, Clemenceau, and Concorde at the southern end of the avenue, where the Place de la Concorde is located. Stores on Champs-Élysées.